You got it.
Convene the meeting, call to order our policy meeting. We're calling to order the policy meeting. We're here, so we'll get started on our second item of the agenda. If I could get a motion to approve the agenda. Motion. Second. Oh, second. Oh, second. Yeah. And all in favor? Aye. And the third item on the agenda, the approval of the minutes. May I have a motion to approve? Motion. Second. All in favor? Aye. Perfect. And now we're going to go to the fourth item of our agenda, which is policy and planning. We're going to be reviewing 3 policies that are being brought up in front of the policy committee. So I will leave it over to Dr. Sonia.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. I want to first of all thank Martha. She made copies for me in advance. I appreciate it very much. I made some additional copies of the last folder. I'd like you to use those because I thought the code for specific usage. I thought I did the process here. And I have them in order in which they should be the way in which I'd like to just discuss them. I start with Title IX. We currently have a Title IX policy. On the right side of your folder, you can see the current policy.
This is it.
It is. That is the current policy on the right-hand side. On the left-hand side, you see the draft updated policy. What's going to take you through, I'm not sure if you had a chance to go through everything that's on that. So I wanted to just take you through where the changes are. And if you look just quickly, you'll notice that I have yellow everywhere because pretty much if you look at the original on the right side and you look at the left side, first of all, you should notice immediately that the template is different. So I've updated the template using what we use now, what I'm assuming we just updated this last year. And so that, of course, changes also categories. So we're starting with the general belief, which is new. And it's a statement you probably will have seen in many of the policies this year, particularly the ones I've written, but others as well. But if you did really come from TAC, with the core commitments and beliefs. Some of it is also similar to what you see here on the purpose and philosophy in the current policy. We've also introduced updated purpose and scope to include some of the laws, making sure that people are grounded in the law, Title IX, and who this policy applies to. It applies to everyone, students, employees, everyone. School-sponsored activities, programs, etc. So that is the purpose of scope. We've expanded the definitions. In the current policy, there are 8 definitions. We expanded the definitions to 23. Some may say that it's extensive. One thing that I've noticed with Title IX since I've come back and taken on the role of chief of this department is that it is something that people really struggle with. They struggle to understand. School personnel struggle to understand it. Students do, and definitely parents do. So one of the big reasons I think policies are important is it's to be accessible to the public, particularly parents. So we try to introduce as many definitions as possible that would help people understand the policy itself, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So there's an expansion there. Guidelines and implementation strategies, page 3. What we've included there are all of just the general reporting requirements, things that are important for people to know in terms of who should make reports, how they should be made, the resolution procedures. We now have procedures. When I first came on board in 2022, when I came back to the central office, we did not have what we have now, which is a robust SOP with very clear processes and procedures. So when this gets online, this will be linked so that folks who go to the policy and also link directly to the SOP. If I was sharing the Google Doc with you, you'd actually be able to link to it. Yeah, so that's intentional. In terms of training and oversight, this is a really important piece too. So what I did was we separated. This template is nice, but sometimes it's a little confusing. So we decided to separate training, oversight, and communications to make it clearer in terms of who does what. So in the training, the fact that we will have annual training, which we already started doing with our principals, which this year included an assessment. And I believe, except for just a few, I believe those are administrators that are actually out right now. All of the administrators have taken and passed the assessment, and that is 80%. That is something new that we haven't done. Also, oversight in terms of really clearly demarcating, what my role is and what whoever has the role of chief of opportunity, but their role would be the Title IX coordinator and the compliance review. There are no names here intentionally, of course, so that it is interchangeable and one is coming back to the board for approval. And then communication, that is also linked. If you go to our opportunity and access website today, right now, the link, you were able to link on this, going to take you directly to all of our training materials for the last 2 years, including the Title IX coordinators, which is Stacy Hayes, her name is clearly there. Her contact information is there, which is all required by law. So we've got the website, it is there. And so we want to make sure that we call that out here as well. In terms of compliance with laws, confidentiality, et cetera, all we did was just update the language there, call out the laws once again, and make it clear that the Title IX coordinator's role is to maintain required records of compliance to make sure that we're in compliance with Title IX. By the way, our Title IX coordinator, I was very lucky and blessed to have been able to hire someone that also is a JD. She's a lawyer as well. She's not practicing, but it's great that she has that law background, so it's very helpful. So, oftentimes you go to Charlie, connect with him all the time, but when he's not available, I still feel comfortable knowing that she has that law background, and we work very closely together. And then the legal references and cross references are all new, and those are all indicative of the information around Title IX. And just a reminder that we're using the 2020 final rule. We are no longer using the 2024 as of January 2025. We can move back to 2020. So online, if this is approved, when it's online, parents, the public will be able to click and actually see the Title IX final rule. They will actually be able to see what the educational amendments are, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
When they click on the PPSD resolution process, they get
the whole
grievance.
SLP, the whole process. They can also again go to our website, everything is right there, the entire process is there, the links are there, and we'll be updating the website. We have been working with the landlord to make sure that we're sorted. So that is it for the Title IX draft policy. I did this because I just wanted to make sure that you guys understood what was new and what was old. It's updated. A lot of the same things are there, but it's been updated to make sure the language follows our current law, policies, and such. So I'll be quiet now to any questions.
Thank you so much. This is great. That is my work. Really. Thank you so much. Tia, no, really, thank you so much. Stacey, can you talk a little bit more about the Title IX Final Rule 2020? So we're using that one as opposed to the 2024.
Right, when our new administration came into office, they reverted back to the 2020.
Okay.
So that's across the board, it's federal.
Well, it was a federal court struck it down, and they deemed it unlawful because of the reference to federal court deemed it unlawful because it defined gender to include gender identity, and that invalidated the whole set of procedures. So we're left with the ones before that didn't make reference to gender identity.
We kind of anticipated, we were waiting to see what would happen in terms of the election, but in anticipation, we didn't make a lot of changes on purpose, because we were waiting to see what would happen, so we didn't have a lot of backtracking to do. But I just try to remind people that sometimes people will go ahead and find the 2024, and then they get confused, so I just want to make sure that it's clear that we're back to the 2020.
Yeah, I appreciate like the clarity of this template. Like it's super easy to read, especially someone who I'm just thinking before I was on the board, like as a parent, I'd be able to follow this. I love the idea of just even like how the board we gave vocabulary, just the idea of really bringing the community along and making sure they have access to the language. So, that's the biggest part of working with the same definition. We all can understand things a little better. Yeah, thank you. I think this is great. I don't have any questions.
This is
I don't know how perfect
There's
that is.
nothing to add for my perspective. So I guess I would just say, I know we spoke about this last time, to motion to waive the second reading, in our motion, and then just bring it to the board requirements meeting.
Yeah, it would have to go as a second reading and adoption,
After
if it's gonna go to the full board next.
I know last time we said we were gonna waive the second reading policy
Oh, okay.
and just bring this
Do you
to.
have a practice of reading it twice in policy and then twice?
No, it's up to the discretion of the chair.
Oh,
It's usually, we read it twice in policy and then we bring forward.
Well, my experience has been, directly of policy, that's asking me questions, just need to for clarity, and then take it to a full board meeting, and it goes twice. So that's first reading, and then the second reading is adoption. What I heard in our meeting last time was that they want to waive one of those readings and go directly to adoption, which would mean that it's, I'm not understanding it. My experience, which would mean that if you're taking it to the board and you want to adopt it, then it's kind of taking it to the second.
right, that's right, exactly, and adoption. So that would be for the board to decide. The board, December 17th can waive so the two readings are typically done by the board, not the policy group. You guys just, yes, you could.
Okay.
You could recommend that that you waive a second reading and adopt it on December 17th, so that it's in place ASAP and the access is immediate for the community, which makes sense.
I just had a request. On page 4, we're under communication. And I know you can find this in other places too, but as a parent, if I came in looking at this policy, it's probably for a reason. So I was wondering if the grievance procedures could be a link as well.
They are.
Oh, this one is?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It doesn't say grievance, it says resolution process.
Oh, perfect.
But I can also,
Okay.
link it there too. It doesn't have to be- You could be linked here 10 times. Or what happens is every time you leave, that's gonna take you back to the same place.
Yeah,
But I did it up here
okay,
intentionally. I didn't do it.
okay.
You might want to call it grievance,
I was about to say that too.
because under the regs themselves, so there is a resolution, the regs describe two kinds of processes. One is a grievance process, and they actually use the word grievance, and then it will result in a finding of culpability or not. The other process that's described in the regs is what's called an informal resolution. That's completely different. That is allowed in some circumstances and is outside of the formal complaint. It's almost like a settlement. But the grievance process does not result in a settlement. The grievance process results in, yes, they're culpable or no. So I might, just so the parent understands we're talking about a formal process, use the word grievance.
Well, actually, so I want to go back. So that's under resolution procedures.
Right.
That's why that's written. So that's why that is there in terms of how, the ways in which, it's actually not just informal resolution, but this is a resolution process. So when you take this link, it actually takes you to a full resolution process, which is a formal process for a investigation, the final decision making, et cetera, which includes the language around appeals and a grievance process, et cetera. So that's what this is for. I think it's really the same thing, because it includes, if you link on this, you would actually get everything. You get the resolution, the grievance process, which includes the appeals process. I can go back and look at it and just make sure that what I'm saying, but I'm pretty sure.
I mean, I'm sure you do. I'm sure you get to the right thing. I'm not doubting that that's what it is. But if you're looking at it as a parent, I think this is what you're saying. Resolution implies settlement, grievance implies, how do I fight this?
So what I'll do is I will add a link to where it says grievance process here, so that when if a parent is looking for that, they can take it from here.
Yeah.
Yeah, Thank you.
So
That
this,
first thing in the morning,
this like Dr. Oye takes out all the language that the PO sanctions and all that.
it takes you, it gives you
So it
everything,
would just bring
it gives you everything, the entire process of.
And you link to it instead of having it all written out.
right.
Yes, you link to it and the document is over.
Yeah.
They can print it, copy it, you can do everything. And that way, when we make changes, it just makes life easier, we just continue to update or some of it,
Okay, one more question related to resolution versus grievance. For the first, vocabulary word advisor, is that a person who can also help through the grievance process?
That's a person that can help me the entire process. And that's, and both parties can have an advisor. It's usually someone that's other than a parent, sometimes it's a trusted family member, sometimes it could be an attorney, but in our experience, it's usually another person, family member, a close family friend, that's acting in support of, usually it's the victim and also the aggressor. Is there something there that you think can make that clear?
I guess I was just wondering, like, if there is confusion around the word grievance versus resolution, or not the ones of the parent, like, yeah, I don't know, but would it make sense to add that the advisor can help with the grievance process? Or is that just implied by saying resolution process? I don't know if I know, opinion, I guess it's a lost question.
I see what you mean. We can add maybe resolution/grievance process.
Totally up to you, I'm just wondering, just based on the last conversation. It looks really, really thorough. And I would be totally in support of going to the second reading option. Recommending that at the board meeting.
Looks like there is something, some formal resolution process in preparation. The formal resolution process is directly discussing the method of formal resolution to address any form of sexual harassment, etc. So there's an entire process that everybody has been trained on, and now what happens when you get a complaint. The complaint may or may not fall into an investigation. If it falls into an investigation, here's the process, here are all the steps involved. Here's what happens once the investigation is completed, it goes to the decision maker, which is myself, and then I review it, and we ask some questions, I may ask for additional information, and then I make a final decision, and then the report is shared with all parties. And then there's a process, if either party is not in agreement, there's an appeals process, all of that is spelled out.
The links on this, I'm sure, like, Golden, even if it has a link to it, it's never put in written definition.
Which we didn't have when I came on board in 2022. That didn't make sense. So now you just go online, go to the website, and just click, and it takes you right through to an electronic form. You can file a complaint, you can also file a harassment complaint, which is when it comes to records.
Is there the timeline of when the user answer, is that also spelled out in the?
It's all spelled out.
in the process?
It's 24 hours or 48 hours, etc. But the investigation itself can take 6 months.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot happening. You have to get witness statements. There's so much that happens, and people have different schedules, especially when you're working with students. A lot of times it can be very purposeful. In terms of the response, the reason we had to do that was because we weren't able to get that immediately on the spot. And usually Stacy responds within 24 hours.
I'll make a motion to bring this to full board. And we recommend that we separate it to adoption. That would be for second. All in favor?
Thank you. The next thing you have underneath the title of the policy, you want to click on that, is our current students and staff bullying harassment policy on the right side. This is it. It says students and staff bullying harassment policy. If you've already reviewed this, you will note that there's a very small section that applies to staff. The majority of this policy really applies to students. And so about a year ago or more, we had, before Stacy even came on board, I had wanted to update this to separate again, but then we lost my time in the magazine for 6 months. She came on board and of course has been on a roller coaster trying to catch up. So we were able to develop two things. The first one I want to focus on is the one that has the least changes because it's really not new. All we did was take the current student and staff bullying harassment policy. We pulled out language that is small, a little bit of language that is applied to staff. And then just updated the student, what is now referred to as a student bullying harassment policy that is entirely focused on students and not adults. And so you will see that we actually touched everything in terms of all parts of this. You'll see in the cross-reference, if you go to the back, you'll see all of the legal references here, but also the cross-reference has been done between our SOP, our racial ethnicity policy, our Title IX policy. We also try to keep the language as similar as possible where necessary, so in terms of definitions, etc. So the purpose and scope, focus of what this policy does, define bullying harassment, highlight the importance of timely response and prevention, outline the superintendent's responsibility to ensure accountability, due process, et cetera, et cetera. Particularly in alignment with our student rights and responsibilities, our student code of conduct, our student discipline policy, our Title I policy, and our Providence school safety plan. We expanded definitions from 9 to 13, so there were 9 in the original policy. We now have 13. I highlighted some of those at school. What that means: cyberbullying, FERPA, mandated reporting. Just some things that we've noticed in the last couple of years that are really important to remind people, not just students and parents, but also employees, staff, administrators. So cyberbullying is something that's very interesting now, especially when we're thinking about AI and all that AI can do. So we need to make sure that we have some robust definition there. And that portal is also there, and the definitions we added also. And this is important because bullying and harassment can be tricky. A lot of times things start off in the neighborhood, at the home, but then it ends up bleeding into the schools. And then it becomes a school issue. And so we just want to make sure that people are clear about that. Around guidelines and implementation strategies, we do already have our framework. We have school implementation requirements already. We have a bullying harassment SOP, which I linked there on page 4. If you click on that link, it takes you to the entire bullying harassment policy and the steps to creating an investigation and how to write the investigation, what to do with it when it's completed. For example, I received one today. I read through it. I asked the administrator to reach out to me because it is not complete. It needs some adjustment. The faster they get back to me, the faster they make those changes, the quicker we can get a response. So in this case, the administrator found that the student was in violation of the policy. So it's really important that we get that information as soon as possible, but it has to be written properly. It has to have written statements. The evidence has to be very clear as to why that conclusion was made, and I need to be able to read it and also agree that that is the right conclusion. So that's the kind of process, and that is spelled out when you click on the link, it takes you right to it.
Okay, so do you, and this is just a debate in the implementation of this law, do you advise, or is the rule of thumb that in order to shift from just a unpleasant encounter between a couple of kids and bullying, that there be at least 2 or 3 incidents? Do you have a rule of thumb for that? Because I know administrators in my practice have interpreted it, and the law is not clear. Massachusetts law actually is more specific, as you probably know. And here, there are some administrators in the state who would say I'm not gonna call it bullying, and that's why I was curious as to your interpretation or experience with this incident today. It's gotta be a couple of times targeted at the same child as opposed to an encounter one-off on the playground. What's your problem, how that works in your practice?
Yeah, so in general, yes, in general, pattern is often when people notice, it happens with the same students, and it happens more than once. However, we've advised principals, school leaders, staff to not necessarily just focus on multiple incidents. Sometimes, I don't want to get too specific, but sometimes there are incidences, and one of the things about the today, it happened one time. However, through the investigation process, we find that, well, actually it didn't just happen one time. That student actually experienced this from the same student multiple times. And what happened was nothing happened. Once it happened once, the student, the student dealt with it. Second time, she then mentioned it to the teacher, and then something pretty, I would call it, egregious happened.
But then you did develop a perception of a pattern or
Well, I think what happened was the adults in the building, we started to look at it. However, the people, and this is what we tell people, don't just look for multiples. Think about what the actual incident was. For example, we had an incident where a student would say, oh, I was being bullied, and then we actually found out they were mad at each other. You have to ask questions. But there are some instances where you don't wait for the second time. So the law is funny, so we have said to look at the incident and don't just look for a pattern. If it's something that you feel based on the nature of the event, if you just use the reporting process, we have a reporting process. Just go through the investigation. You're doing it anyway, you're asking questions, you're looking for witnesses, you're interviewing the student anyway. Create the report, and if you come to the conclusion after doing that, and it is not just something you have it in mind, but you've done your due diligence. So we don't advise that you do it.
it's good to know.
I have to put my glasses back on to see this is what's happening to me. Training and oversight, we discussed the training there. There's some very important language around training students, which is something that I'm particularly hoping to institute this year at least once, if not twice, to get some training for students with a webinar option. Staff training and capacity building, we have trained our administrators, but I'd like to get to the point, we train some of our new staff, but I'd like to get to the point where we make this part also of the yearly training for our staff. So that is there. Also frequency of delivery. There's information there on language there on school level oversight, and PPSC level oversight. The bullying investigations are done at the school level by the administrators, either the principal or the assistant principal, and then it comes up to our office and one person on the first. But they are the ones that do the entire investigation. It's very different. A little bit, give them a little bit more time to the time around in which Stacy's the one, if there's an investigation, will do the investigation. In this case, the principal and assistant principal will do the investigation themselves, as they should. And based on the process, come to a conclusion as to whether or not our policy has been violated. Comes to us, we take a look at it, agree, or we ask them questions, and then we share those findings with families. And if in fact the student is found to be in violation of the policy, they have to approve what the sanctions will be to the student, and also what the support measures will be in place for the student who is affected. We also try to push if possible for some restorative meeting where both parties are able, if they agree, that they're able to come together and facilitate like John Brown, that is a restorative manager, is hoping to have at least an individual can sign at no cost to go and help try to, because they still have to do this. You can go to the same school, and sometimes they have the same track team, football team, and you can go to massive classes together, you can all use some celebration.
I have a question.
Absolutely.
So you said there's like like support put in place for the person in person who is bullying,
Yes.
and there's sanctions for the person who did the bullying, are there also support put in place for the person who is bullying, because this child probably also is going through some things.
Hurt people, hurt people.
Right.
Oftentimes counseling. I got people counseling, check-ins, et cetera, depending on the nature of
What they need.
Absolutely. The goal is to hold that student accountable to also provide support for that student so that they look at counselors that don't get it.
Right, yeah, and impact even on the larger community.
For the communication part and the school person and accountability, really like this annual report for Providence School Board summarizing. I saw that school level principals and head of schools are supposed to maintain those records and monitor it. Is there like a monitoring schedule for those schools on the school level? Like are they reporting to you guys quarterly, monthly, and what's going on with harassment in your school? Or is it just they give it to you annually basis and then that's what it goes to us?
Yeah, right now, what happens is once we get the report, you find me, I have it in my office, I have it on. They also have it up there. And this is the reason why it's important. They're at the school level, I'm not at the school level. Well, let's say Nicole, they just did a report on me and they found me to be in violation of the law. They went through the entire investigation. They've already met with mom and the student. They have a copy of what I have. And I go back now and I do something. They do another story. Well, now they have on record the initial incident, and now they have another incident. So now they actually are gathering data, right? That is showing that the student is really, that there's something more going on, right? Because they already did the investigation, they provided some sanctions, they provided some support, now this is happening. But we want them to provide those things and to actually act quickly. So, for example, they would call our office and say, and this happens all the time, this has happened a couple of times. We just had another incident with a student. So some of the questions I'll ask is, well, I'll ask some more questions around what are some of the behaviors that happen? Where is this behavior happening? A lot of times I'm asking about, the student has been sent to the MTSS for some further special distance and some kind of review. And a lot of times, sometimes those students have ended up with an IEP. Huge, right? Because there's some other things there. We also want them, we haven't put this in place yet, but eventually what I'd like to see if I can larger staff. Remember, it's me and another person, and I have other responsibilities too. Like this morning I was at a school for 3 hours, which I love for district law. So this is not the student consistent in my work. We had a team, we eventually both the things we get better than we do to have a team. So I would love to have more monitoring happen. We have been able to do an RFP for some software to help us with really not just monitoring, but also data analysis. We've been able to get Maxians, so I'm waiting to get them on board because I think that will help a lot with us being able to do more recording. I want to be able to see tracks. That's somebody telling me.
Because that was my question, like on a higher bird's eye view, I know we're following specific kids, but I want to see like what schools are having the same incidents, like do they need more training?
Yes.
What's going on in these specific schools?
And we have noticed that for certain schools, and we have actually spent more time with those schools, with actually the physical visits because it's very, we don't using Omnivore, which is not necessarily the best software, plus our Google Docs and tracking. When we notice those things, for example, we notice we get more incidences, we're getting more incidences of the elementary. Ironically, in the second one, people would think that would be opposite. That's what we see. And much younger students as well. So we're having conversations with those schools. And there's some schools we don't ever hear from, which is also really problematic. Because that tells me, I wonder, is there really nothing happening or are there any recording or exactly. So no data is not also good data as well. So yes, we are, but we're managing it to be.
Is there still a mandate to report this to Raleigh? So there is a state, right, supposedly is collecting this data, DIN file.
No one has asked me for it, but
Okay.
it sounds familiar.
It's a regulation, and I've had actual cases at RIDE where the bullying report has been filed, and my impression is that some schools, districts do it, some don't. I know it's in a reg, I don't have it in front of me, but it's de-identified in January and June, you tell RIDE how many incidents you had, how many have been founded, how many have been unfounded. Not disclosing the names, but just to give the data that we're all talking about. I don't feel like RIDE has been focused on collecting this data or reporting it, but that's why I asked.
It sounds familiar to me because it sounds familiar when I was a principal, we were trained many years ago. The reporting system was very different. I recall that. Since I took it on this morning, it's such a nice they do, I'm ready.
I don't think they've been asking, and I don't quite know why, but I've got other things on my mind.
When does this annual report to the school board is needed?
Well, once this is approved, that's.
So is this something new?
So this, yeah, I mean, since I came back here in July 2022, we haven't made it before.
Okay.
So one of the reasons I wanted to have this policy in place is so that we can establish
At the end of the year.
and usually it's usually
Okay.
How does this, intersect with existing policy around, or intersect with, if at all, existing policy around racial discrimination? Thinking about like some of the harder to track cases around like microaggressions or that are racially, maybe not just racially, but like behavioral or geared towards stuff that might not be as evident as a harassment or bullying, as like things like micro assaults that are like psychological attacks. And I guess I'm just interested of like how is this policy the one that would cover how to report something like that, or is that something different?
Yeah, that's interesting that you say that. So a couple of things. First of all, the incident that I was referring to today actually involved some racial acts. I did a training, believe it or not, yesterday as I was riding from Maryland, 8 hours in this storm. I was on a webinar for 6 hours, from 10 to 5:30, specifically on Title VI. And Title VI is focused on racial discrimination, etc., which is a whole other conversation about the legal superintendent's office. That's a base formula. I don't know how we can do that, but there's a lot of overlap. And that is something that I haven't had a chance to share with you yet, but I believe I need to do a training with our administrative campus process. And there's going to be training. It's something that is beginning to pop up quite a bit around districts around the country, particularly in recent months, and it's something that we have to focus on. And so I went to that training. I went to the training, thankfully it was virtual, intentionally, and I'll take a few more tricks and things there as well when she comes back on Friday. I'm going to do for her because there's some further training we need to do beyond Title IX and bullying harassment. I can specifically in Title VI and have to think about how that's going to impact her work because it bleeds into each other. It's very much overlapping. We both recognize the fact that we're going to have to take that. So, that's all.
I think you raise a great question, and when we get to the policy list, one of my observations is that the district doesn't seem to have an anti-discrimination policy that's focused on Title VI. So like when you talk about discrimination, and you need to have one because it's Title VI is the companion law to Title IX, and it prohibits discrimination on the basis not just of race but of national origin, which may be part of the reason there's an uptick now because of the kind of anti-immigrant hostility that's being shown, and I think there's probably some mirroring that you can do. Title IX has a particular script, Title VI, there are templates out there, and that would be a way to get at, and when the OCR, the Officer of Civil Rights, before the recent president sort of dismantled it, there have been, pretty robust investigations about race discrimination in this state. I remember 1 years ago in East Providence where ACR went in over racial epithets and, not only made findings that it had happened, but also did the kind of prophylactic training and required as a resolution that the school district get its act together in making people aware. So I think there's some legal anti-discrimination policies that you can sort of add to your quiver here that would, round it out and would be different from just the anti-bullying.
I agree. And I think states have it for a reason. So I went to that training was my grandmother was great. She was writing. She's like, I get on this one. So she was, I was telling her what to ask, and she was writing in the chat. It was very funny.
Oh, she was doing the writing
She
for
was doing the
you.
writing.
I see. She was taking dictation.
Props for your dress. So, but I'm glad, like I said, I'm glad I went because literally today I looked at this report and it was really, only line a little bit beyond this. It was bullying, but it was very racial based.
Yeah.
Right, and it was very specific, and these are true. It's high school kids, right? And so I think that because of a lot of what's happening right now, I think that filter is off. And so, and Stacy and I have been talking about this for a couple of months because we've been noticing a few things, and so that's why I wanted to make sure we went to the training. And I'm glad I did, and I agree with you. Unfortunately, I didn't want to policy. That's what we need to. We do have, if you look into our resource guide, if you train all principals, and it does include EEL discrimination. We do have SOPs and processes for that, for adults and for students. It's very clear and it's as clear as it can get right now around who does what to do. HR gets involved, they look at different reporting,
Right.
etc. So we do have the SOP. Very, especially focused on transgender students and minorities, et cetera, but I think we do need to really focus on Title VI. And the good thing about Title VI is it has less, because there's not a lot of
There's no regulations.
federal
right?
regulations.
It's bizarre. Like they've made Title IX where you have to do this song and dance, but then Title VI, you just do it the way you want to do it.
you want to do. So for me, it's a good thing, because we can do what we need to do and, making it robust as we want. But in general, I do think it's going to be very clear rules, federal regulations, not so much.
Can I ask one more question related to that? And maybe we'll get into it, but there probably is already a policy that maybe I'm just not on right now, but I do wonder about when I think about central power of Title VI and the need for it, like, I definitely see it from student to student, maybe definitely staff to staff, but also staff to student. And I'm just wondering if that's like, right, this is like student to student, and then we're gonna look at employee.
Right.
But is there something about bullying from staff to student?
Yeah, so yes, in our SOPs, we do have something that focuses on students, student versus student, student versus employees. We do have something in our SOPs. Okay, but we don't, but I think Title VI, I think we will open a policy around Title VI. That would be, that would encompass what you're asking. And that's what we go with.
In the same way that Title IX would.
Yes.
It covers everybody. It's basically no discrimination against
Period.
students, employees. I mean, it doesn't matter who the perpetrator is. It's,
Does that make sense? It does. But we do have, but the good news is we do have SOPs around school. We have access, I've centralized access to the resource guide. So a lot of times you go through it, you can see it. It's very clearly defined. On slide 78 actually has all the resources and then it's grouped under Title IX discrimination, bullying, purposely, so people can get to know this quickly and access them.
and know how to report it.
Is there any other discussion, any questions about the student bullying harassment? These are great questions, guys. I appreciate it.
Okay, so a motion to bring to the board, for acceptance
bring to the board with the recommendation of second reading and adoption.
All in favor?
For the final policy, and this has been shared with human resources and share very, very early on. So they're aware of it. This is the one that we focus on specifically on employees. We look at the cross-reference, we look at a couple of policies, including the Unified, New York City, Boston Public Schools, to just to make sure that our policy was in line with some other districts, larger districts that had them reference close to ours as well. We also cross-referenced the bullying harassment policy for students, our SOP, our racial and ethnic equity policy, which I think once we have draft regulations for that policy that were drafted with a lot of community input last year, but they haven't gone anywhere yet. But I think that would actually help to get at the question you had around race and ethnicity and discrimination. So that's in good news. They reference that policy as well as Title IX. And then all of the laws were already here from the United States, pretty much the same ones from the student and staff bullying harassment policy, the original. This is a brand new policy, so I didn't even bother highlighting everything is new. It is I think it's an exhaustive draft. It's not very long. So this is the one where, I don't know if you have additional questions, if there are things that that you think are missing. So I think we just take it a minute to kind of go through it. It's much shorter than the other ones. Just want to make sure people have their eyes on this. If there's anything that you think we should include or is missing, we'll go back.
So I can just throw something out there that might be a little potentially disruptive. This is exactly the kind of document that we are talking about delegating to the superintendent and not making policy. Because we're trying, as we see in the next piece of our conversation tonight, we're trying to adhere to the recommendations of the Council of Great City Schools to only own as a board a very limited slice of the operational rules. And the one that is sort of unclear at this point is, and I put this in the documents that are in front of you tonight, about what's legally required. So there are certain policies that must be adopted by an employer or a school district. Title IX is one of them, anti-bullying is one of them. But what has been recommended by the council is to push everything that isn't legally required down to the superintendent so that the board doesn't have the responsibility and ownership of monitoring the implementation of 100 or 150 policies that address every feature of operations and administration. We can see that when we look at the list that we've compiled over the past few months. So I'm not in any way interfering with this process of having this adopted, but I do think it runs counter to what the board is trying to do to comply with the Council of Great City Schools' explicit repeated training, which is to push down and leave to the superintendent the responsibility of developing, not necessarily as a policy, but maybe as you've been describing it, standard operating procedures, which sounds like exactly what delegated work would look like. The rules about how to manage the workforce, the facilities, the students, and so forth, and get that off the policy platform. So I'm just throwing it out there. I think it would be a little clearer when we look at the list of what we've collectively decided should be within the superintendent's work. It's a lot, and it's probably, there's probably more that's not even reflected on that list. But I just wonder about the prudence of taking a particular HR issue, because that's what this really is, how employees are relating to each other, and elevating it to a policy at the same time that we're trying to do.
Well, I hear what you're saying, and I thought about that. I decided to bring this to anyway, until, again, but if you notice the references in this, to be anti-bullying, anti-discrimination, they should be on every budget, and they actually are taxed. So I don't see I don't see anti-bullying for students different from anti-bullying for employees, because anti-bullying for employees and bullying for employees can actually adversely affect students. So that's why I wanted to raise it. Whatever decision you guys are going to make, I get it, but I felt like the bullying, harassment, the racial, like those things are things that have direct connection to law. And so that's why I felt like I didn't hear anything different, so that's why I doing it. But if you guys decide that it's not, then that's good too. But I just wanted to make sure that I brought it to you.
So I don't think the question is whether the rules that guide the district have a connection to law, because literally everything that this district does operationally can be grounded in a statute or in a regulation. For example, the BEP, the Basic Education Program, tells the district everything about testing, assessment, facilities, laws envelope everything you do as a district. That's not the question. The question that the council posed is this a policy that legally the board, as opposed to the district, must adopt? Certain policies, the Title IX is perhaps one of them, although it's not crystal clear, has to be adopted by the governing body, the board. Same with certain other policies, but a lot of policies, or what we call policies, don't have to be adopted by the board. The superintendent can adopt a policy. It's just not necessarily a policy within the meaning of Title 16. It's a policy understood in a more common sense way. It's a rule. It's an SOP, exactly. So absolutely everything you should be doing should be grounded in legal compliance. For example, your HR rules, the FMLA, the ADA, the Pregnant Women's Fairness, the Pregnant Parent Fairness Act. Everything you do in HR has got a law connected to it. There's literally nothing that you do in HR that isn't legally grounded. And the same would be true of monitoring students. The IDEA controls everything you do around students with special needs. The basic education program is about, 50 pages of regulations. So I wouldn't be worried about whether there's a legal underpinning. And I think the project of getting the board aware of what you're doing is something we should be talking about, so that the reporting can go in front of the board, how things are working out under Title IX. I'm just questioning whether the board needs to be in the mix on every single policy, because that's counter to what we're trying to do. That's just, I'm throwing it out there.
I don't think this is like, I think it's like conversation, I think it's called, I'm of the opinion that the board should be, that there should be a policy that comes to the board. I'm not board member, I'm definitely not an attorney, but as an educator, as someone who's worked with students and adults, I just think that there are certain policies, race and ethnicity, discrimination, bullying, harassment, Title IX, they're all intertwined and connected, so those are things that work. That's just, I'm not a part of the council conversation. I do think that what the council is saying is absolutely true, and I think the exercise that I've been able to participate, I'm very grateful to participate in all of you, has been very helpful. And looking at your document, I love it, because to me, it kind of gives you an idea of where your focus should be, and you can't focus on everything. The example that you gave, that is not speaking. I love the example you gave in one of our meetings, can't do everything, what's your focus? Like, what's your focus and your goal this year, or the next 2 years, or next 3 years? So what actions are you putting in place actually to reach those goals? Have you ever put the actions in place or not?
Well, one solution might be to add this to the list of potentially legally mandated policies and sort of put off discussion about whether it's going to be elevated or not, and leave that to a further discussion, because one of the recommendations I make in the document I presented tonight is that we haven't yet really sifted through what what policies that are legally required should be in the board's hands versus the superintendent's hands. And until we sit down and collectively decide that, we want to take Title IX, we want to take Title VI, because those are key to our equity vision. I think that should be put off and not decided tonight, because it's a big project. There's a big list of policies that are legally required, that I think are legally required, putting aside grounded to law, that where the state or federal government has said, you board employer must adopt a policy. That's what I'm looking for. And that list is bigger than the few we have. And then once we have that list, then you guys can decide, we want to own this, we want to push this down, we want to own, sort of in the same way that we've
I
done.
guess my question is, just for clarification, because I was here for the training, policy training, and this, us giving this to the district, the difference between us keeping it is that we would have to monitor this, the implementation, so we would have to monitor the staff voting.
It puts you in the the way AJ described it in his training is, it puts you in the responsibility of, yes, making sure it's owning it. Like, is this policy working? You do a check-in on a, 3 or 4 times a year. Is this working? You're getting, this is the kind of policy that puts you in the position of doing the work that you're really trying to have the superintendent and his or her staff do. And I am confident that AJ would say this should be delegated. But I think that you guys collectively have to decide what of the legally required policies you want to push down and which you want to hold on and which you want to hold on to. And it may be that Title VI, Title IX, the cluster of anti-discrimination laws is important for you to hold tight to, as you're suggesting. I'm not passing judgment on that. I'm just pointing out that structurally we're at this moment where you're trying to go on a diet, and now we're kind of taking in
Calories.
well, it's a good calorie. It's just there's a tension between the desire to make sure you're covering everything and delegate, especially since you're kind of new at the delegating. It's hard, but I raise it. That's all.
That's good. The other question I have too is, right now we have a student and staff bullying harassment policy that is on the books. So if something happens tomorrow, it's policy. It's there, and that's what we're held accountable to. So I guess my question is, let's say that you guys decided not to keep the employee bullying harassment for the superintendent. Then I guess my question is, for me, the issue is when something happens, that right now that's a policy that I have to go to. And right now it's a board policy. So what we did was we separated into student and staff. So are we thinking that we would then remove the staff from?
You could discipline an employee without having a policy. I mean, if you have an employee, this is like, you have an employee who is telling offensive jokes, making slurs and epithets against another employee, they're hauled in for a reprimand, we can split. You don't, it's always not, that's why I think it's really important and you could write a standard operating procedure. The point of the delegation is to empower you to take this stuff and make your rules, make your own, make standard operating procedures for HR that you own, that you decide is best practice, and that, you want to warn employees who engage in misconduct that if they do something like that, they're going to be held accountable, which is why a rule is good. But
right now, though,
But even without a rule, you could say, if and this happens all the time, there's bullying, somebody comes in and says, I'm being bullied, and the principal has to fix it. And they fix it with the standard HR process of saying, that's under, you can use the teacher certification regulations and say that is unprofessional conduct that violates the responsibilities under the teacher cert regulations, and it violates the code of professional conduct. Then that's a state law, and you don't need a policy to say you're in violation for behaving in this way towards coworkers.
oh no, I get it completely. I guess what I'm saying is that as part of this decision-making process, when do we remove those from the board policies? Because
When the board approves
to get rid
the reform, that's,
Yes, I think in
because people
January,
keep pointing it.
yeah, in January, we're bringing up the new list, so that's what.
no, we're bringing it up in December.
Is that the special meeting or is that?
So the point of the next item on the agenda is to get board approval to proceed with the reform.
What's delegated and what's out.
Right, is to get the board to say, okay, you board, policy committee, start writing policies on governance, delegation, you superintendent, get to work. And here are your areas. And I think it can become clearer once the board approves the blueprint. But I would think it's going to be January. There's going to be a lot of, if the board agrees with this, there's going to be a delegation of responsibility. And that's going to be up to the superintendent to identify who's going to be doing that work. And it sounds like we need to be in the thick of it.
Yeah, because I just want to remind everybody that what happens, especially with the folks, is they vote to the core policies that are up there. And so sometimes that gets, either if there's no policy, it's actually better, because if there is no policy, then we have SOPs, the SOPs are there, we're good. But right now, there actually is a policy. And so the reason I wanted to get, for example, the Title IX, it's there. It's what we have here. It's what's there. I want to do this quickly, but smartly. Because I don't, we don't want to jump up. I want to have the right thing up there so that when something happens, I can hold folks accountable.
Well, Title IX, you're right. You need that right away.
But the bullying harassment policy is there right now, and it's not really students and staff. It really is mostly students. I shared with you the students. Are we thinking that we would just, if the student one, let's say the student was, I'm just asking, would we then remove what's there now and just replace that with the student bullying harassment policy?
Yes.
And then leave the employee piece, what I'm hearing you say is leave the employee piece to the resource, which is
Yes.
superintendent.
Yes.
Just made that SOP.
Exactly.
Embedded in other.
Exactly.
I mean, I get, I
Yes.
just want to make sure we remember that some of these things are existing right now, and that people want to look, they're going to go there, they're going to see, we have this policy up there. So just want you to keep that in mind as we're creating this timeline, that we're removing things or adding things.
So there'll be explicit, so once the redrafting is in play, there'll be, some things will come down and a new one will go up. So for governance, there are some, and I listed them, there's some governance policies. The ones that are rewritten, the old ones will come down, the new one will go up. Those that are delegated are going to be yours to decide, this is junk, this needs to be rewritten, and this is, we're not going to do a policy. You're not going to be writing policies, you're going to be writing your SOPs, and you're going to say, this is over, this we can use as an SOP. So you're going to be in charge of that with certain, communication with the board as to how it's going, but it gives you a ton of freedom. As long as it's the right freedom.
Actually, can I ask a question? I am understanding and trying to follow the legality that's burdened on the board or not. I guess more logistically. how things would be separated. I guess what I'm wondering philosophically, and I don't want to belabor this at all, but like, I feel like there is also, check me if I'm wrong, Dr. Randy, but I feel like there's also like this like tension of like there being like a power in the board adopting policy to like make us, to like be completely real about like what we believe in kind of thing, you know? And I'm just wondering like, is there something about this policy that we feel the board needs to like take a stance on, or like, do you know what I mean? Or own, like, is there something that, I don't know, maybe we're missing around, maybe it's not a policy, maybe it's another conversation, I'm just wondering if there's something here that you feel Dr. Onye needs to be learned by the board to align with what our values are as a district.
So I think that anything related to discrimination, this is just my own opinion, should be owned by the board. But I also understand your point, so it makes a lot of sense when this everything happens. I agree that everything doesn't need to be. I absolutely agree. But I also think that there are certain things that anything that connects to discrimination, gender.
This one doesn't specifically, this is about,
Yes.
so I
I
think
guess
what
bullying,
you,
harassment, I feel like bullying, harassment, there maybe definitely with students. I think what I'm hearing you say is it may not necessarily be to that level for employees and could just live with HR. I get it. And
so I mean, I totally agree with you that anything pertaining to I think you need more policies that are owned by the board that prohibit discrimination. You need a policy that says you can't discriminate on the basis of disability, that harassment on protected characteristics is unlawful, and there should be, that shouldn't be an SLP, that should be a policy based on your argument that the board owns as part of its promotion of fairness and equality. You don't have those right now. You don't have enough policies that protect against discrimination. You have Title IX, and that's basically it, and that's far from enough. So one thing that should be done is those policies should be written and become board owned. This, which isn't about discrimination, it's about, it isn't explicitly, because it doesn't say this is bullying on the basis of a protected characteristic. It could be, but this little piece about harassment based on protected status, that should be a standalone policy. This, talking about being, respectful towards each other, is encompassed within the rules of professional conduct and could be handled in a different way. My suggestion would be, if you want to emphasize the non-discrimination aspect of this, you need a different set of policies. You need a
That's the Title VI.
actually, I would call it, I wouldn't limit it to Title VI. I would call it a non-discrimination policy for students and a non-discrimination policy for staff. I've done them for districts where you have two lanes. Discrimination on the basis of protected characteristics is a lawful hard stop. It can happen in the following ways. If employees feel this way, here's who you report to. It should be HR. If a student feels this way, it should be a student-centered reporting structure. So you should have two strong non-discrimination policies, one of which, or both of which, would reference the Title IX, because Title IX is a specific form of discrimination, and that really declares that discrimination, which includes harassment, that harassment is a form of discrimination on the basis of a protected status. And it can be as robust as you want, and it should be a standalone. It will cite Title VI, it will cite the ADA, it will cite Title VII, it will cite all the federal and state laws that protect against discrimination. It can and should. The district is not afraid of the federal government. It would protect on the basis of gender identity. And then you have your board-owned platform that is policy, and you can take your HR stuff and do your own work.
Would that, I don't want to assume that's how you feel. But I think maybe that's how I feel, maybe I'm projecting. because like I do feel like the board should own anti-discrimination policy. And I want to make sure there's a pathway for that. And so, does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. And I'm actually listening to, because I just love to look at, I know many people who look. And in listening to Sarah, what I heard from you is to go back and take another look at this and how we believe the classroom. Because
Make it stronger.
yes, because what I'm thinking about is I'm thinking about protecting class. That's what I'm thinking about.
Right, but you're not featuring
But
that.
it's not actually the prominent piece, so.
Right.
Yeah.
So this is one where I would go back, redo, and not call it.
And I'm happy to send you some,
Please.
I will absolutely
And
send you.
your sister.
So there's some non-discrimination that was like Title VI, and you can make it more robust, you can turn the template around to be more aligned with the way you do things, but that is absolutely something you need and should have, and that would be something that the board can decide, you know, these are legally required policies that we want to own, and it's it's not that many, and it's important to us. And then all the mean girl stuff that can happen among teachers, which may not be based on protected characteristics, that's what I see. The stuff in the lunchroom, and, you know, that happens, and that is not unimportant, but that's not what you're really talking about. That's a different problem.
This was a good conversation, because it gave me some point that I need to go back in.
I think we need to turn this into a bigger deal.
Yeah, I agree. People do podcasts.
No, I think it's really important. I mean, because unless you have that really declared, people sometimes think they can get away with that.
We do have transgender non-discrimination.
Right, that's good
We have that.
for students because we're required to have it.
Yes.
But we should, like,
Send it to me.
I mean, yeah, I mean, I don't want to get you in trouble there, however. So, I mean, transgender faces federal eyes, so I don't, you know,
So what I'm saying is that what you're describing.
that's how the Title IX policy got invalidated by the federal courts, because they were saying it's not a part of. But in this state, it is protected, so we have state refuge, and we can.
I mean, district policy. That's why I like policy, because we have a district policy that follows the state policy around.
The state is very protective, so we can just rely on state laws.
All right, so what I will do is I will review, revise, I'm gonna wait for you to send me your superstar, I can take a look at this. What about the student bullying? What do you guys think about that? Moving forward with that one, or?
You have to have it.
So student bullying, you have to have it, so I'm 2 for 3.
Yeah.
We have to, do an action.
I have a question. And I don't know if relevance is anything to this. I'm a student and I'm being harassed by a teacher. They're bothering me every day when I look. I can't talk to my parent about it because culturally, whatever, we don't talk. Teachers are right, I'm wrong. I can't talk to the principal because I'm smart enough to know that that teacher's principal is bad. Who do I go to? Do I go to you as a student?
So that's a good question. I'm hoping that you will go to your principal, or you go to a counselor. There will be an adult in the room in that school. If there's not one adult in that school that I can go to as a student, that's a problem, right? But let's say you find an adult. Usually, because this has happened in the past, there'll be a social workers, psychologists, principal, whatever. A lot of times it ends up coming to my office anyway. And then we work on it. But I think the bigger fundamental question is, you know, why would we not have one adult in that school that you can go to? That's a whole nother conversation. Because that's not cool. That's unhealthy. Right? So, but yes, if they find an adult, eventually a lot of times that doesn't happen. And usually we're able to connect to the racial ethnic policy, we're able to connect to the Title IX policy, we're able to connect to bullying. We have, you know, a lot more board. Sometimes it's a gender issue. oftentimes that holds us up when we have that gender non-discrimination policy. That's why I say there are certain things that I just feel like I'm glad that we all agree around discrimination, period, that have to be at the highest level, so that you send a very clear message about what you can and cannot do. I agree with what you're saying. This employee policy is soft. It doesn't even do the trick.
Well, it's not featuring what you're really trying to do, and the language of this you could do with existing stop being a mean girl. I don't mean to harp on the girl, it's just my image, teachers being unkind to each other.
We do have non-discrimination, SOP for non-discrimination for employees. There's a whole process here. That happens at the school level. Coordinate with HR and support the process. So we have an SOP. Just FYI.
So, I mean, you've already kind of, by virtue of doing what these SLPs, you've already started doing the delegated work. Probably what needs to happen is we just need to get rid of these old policies and just throw them in the trash bin, and then give you total space to make those materials.
For example, employees, bullying, harassment, unprotected status, human resources handlers all the time. But if it's a bullying, harassment case and it's based on protected status, that goes to the office.
So you've already figured out how to do this. We're just kind of cleaning out the closet, I think, is really what it boils down to, and making what's in writing align with what you're already doing.
That's what I'm saying. So we're going backwards.
Yeah.
We had to get this out right away when it came up on board. Policies. Yeah. All right, thank you.
Thank you. So we have a motion to, we'll have to again through next.
Again, you mean the
Yes.
policy?
Yeah.
I will work really hard to make sure that happens. If I can get a sample.
Yeah.
It's just gonna be continued.
Yeah, we'll make a motion to send it back to Dr. Oden to be reviewed and revised. So we'll see you again next time.
I'm excited because it's going to be a doozy.
It's gonna be just as, your goal should be, it should be just as damn long as the Title IX policy, which feels endless. I mean, I just looked at mine, it's like 50, there, because you're very smart, you made a link for the resolution, for the process, because that process can be,
Another template.
oh my God, it's like by the time you finish reading it, you're like, I'll just draw them.
Thank you, Dr. Now we're gonna be moving on to item number 5, discussion and vote to recommend for board approval.
I'm sorry. So, did the draft for the student bullying harassment policy, did that pass?
Yes.
Okay, I apologize. I missed that. Sorry.
Two separate, we can adopt that at board level.
Okay.
Right, so we're mentioning item number 5, list for recommended board approval, prescribing policies to delegate and which policies we're going to take ownership of. This was a list created by Sarah, thank you for getting all the information together and putting it in a digestible format.
This reflects the work you folks have done. I just put it together with a little bit of advice in the footnotes. It's synthesizing the policy diet document that you've been working on for a while. And the categories that the council says you should be owning are A, B, and C. So the goals and guardrails are those policies that provide direction to the superintendent on your goals and your guardrails, which are still a bit in play, but once they're finalized, you can capture that in policy. That would be sort of your declaration of purpose, your the focus of the student outcomes project. I added here the core beliefs and commitments when you decide who's doing the drafting, you want to take a look at that existing policy to see if there's anything in there you want to run to. And the racial and ethnic equity is clearly a policy that you wanted to hold on to. That might be an interesting policy to link to the anti-discrimination policies and make that a sort of standalone category, which is based on our conversation, but I put it in the rules and guardrails category because it really speaks to sort of broader moral positions of the board. The governance policies as defined by AJ and the council's training are those that describe the board's relationship with the community members and the board's relationship with each other. And again, I'm listing these policies without committing the board to keeping them, but they're the ones that fall into that category, and those are the numbers. I've also attached as an exhibit, because one of the policies that you're going to be drafting is the policy on adopting policies. And you have one that was drafted about a year ago, it wasn't adopted, it maybe likely need modification, but also I included some language from the bylaws of the Barrington Public Schools, which describes a policy adoption process, just to give you more raw material to work with when you come up with your new language. The board code of conduct, I think I meant code of conduct, I'm pretty sure that refers to the ethical code. I don't know what 207 says, but that's in that category. And then I also attached as Exhibit 1 the language suggested by the Council of Great City Schools about policies that would describe how the board resolves conflicts within its own body, how to manage issues of information provided about board member behavior. Again, this is just suggested language, it's not mandated, but I organized it so it's there for you. And then there was a discussion about developing some policy around professional development and new member onboarding. And so I gave you the Barrington language because it's very robust, so you can use it or not. The delegation policies are not the policies that are delegated, but the policies that describe your relationship with the superintendent. So it's a little bit misleading in that sense, but that's why I included the reference to the text. This is all of your superintendent stuff. You have a lot of it there. You have plenty of raw material to work with. I also included a few other suggestions from the council about communication between board members and staff who report to the board, communication between board members and staff who do not report to the board. Consensus was at some point when we were talking about this, that maybe this was a little over the top. But again, it's there to look at. These are the policies that from my record keeping, were those that the board wanted to own. I don't know if you still feel that way, but that was based on, our rubric. I used 5 as the cutoff, so anything 5 and above I gave to you, anything 0 to 4 I gave to the superintendent. These were the ones that I have no idea why you said food services. I'm completely baffled by it. I don't know. I remember Tyrell was concerned about the elected school division. The basic education program is one that you probably, it's there for conversation. I don't know how you're going to feel about it, but it's there. This last category, legally required board policies, this is the one that I started to reference. There were only a few policies that you had that we decided are legally required for the board to adopt. Again, there are lots of things that law tells you to do. Title IX is definitely there. I think child abuse and neglect and reporting should be something that you probably legally should own. Suicide prevention and response and recovery. What I have done here in the exhibit 4 is I've attached a list of every state law that says there shall be a policy. Now, it doesn't say this has to be adopted by the board. It just says school districts must have a policy on this, that, and the other. But keep in mind that when the General Assembly says policy, or when the Council of Elementary and Secondary Education says policy, they may not mean that it has to be a board policy. They may be using that term to say, you school district need a general rule to guide. So I think it's a good exercise just to show you how many times the word policy appears in state and federal law. But I think it's your decision with some legal guidance because, you know, unless it says the board must adopt it, which it does in a few cases only. Everything else is up for grabs. And again, it's another point of like exercising your judgment and discretion as a group, which you want to own and which you want to push down. And I think the conversation we just had tells you, at least in this group, there's a certain cluster of stuff that you want to own.
I think I want to just say too, for me, as I'm thinking of this, I always use the word policy to refer to board governance. That's my language. And so I have to reorient myself.
And I don't think that I don't think, like,
I don't think that's what they mean.
just
That's
to
what
give
I've
you,
always. when I
just
hear
to give
policy,
you
that's
an
what I-
example, just to give you the
That's really
BEP,
helpful.
the BEP, which is like your set of state laws on how to run a school district. I gave you those examples right in the document. They use the word policy all the time. They say each LEA shall establish a comprehensive set of district-wide policies that will guide the development, alignment, and implementation of curriculum. Well, I don't think that means that the board has to have a policy on curriculum. I think it means you do. So I think 9 out of 10 of these mentions are going to be on your plate. But I still think we need to kind of be aware of what's legally required and then very self-consciously and intentionally say, that's yours, this is ours. And so we kind of do that same diet or decision-making about where you want to put your focus. And so legally required board policies is another layer of project to do. And all you're doing now is saying, this categorization is good, and we want the board permission to redo the policy manual to reform it in this manner. It doesn't mean you have to finish it by December 17th, because it's impossible. And then the last listing is just all the existing policies that are clearly your job. And
Superintendent.
I have a feeling that, like, you're gonna go through these and go, we don't want this, we don't want this. Like, multi-tiered system of support. You already do that. I mean, you don't need a policy saying, we're gonna have multi-tiered systems of support. So a lot of this is just gonna go away.
And I think that, Susan, I'm just thinking about us, cabinet, we need to have a whole other professional learning about reorienting ourselves. That multi-tiered system support policy, we just put that out. We literally,
You can still, you can make it part of your standard operating procedure.
I think the fear, I don't want to speak for everyone, but I think there's the fear, there's been a lot of turnover in this district. And I think the fear was to get board policy so that it would stick, even though we have all these policies and we didn't get regulations about. And you can talk to other folks around here, but I think, because I'm thinking about myself, right? Like for me, I lived through a lot of those, like almost all of those transitions, right? And the fear sometimes is that you do all of this work and someone new comes in and then it's gone. but that if you had a board policy that would force folks to toe the line because it's a board policy. So I think we have to reorient ourselves into thinking different. I know I'm speaking for myself, like I'm living.
I
sitting here
really
thinking,
wonder
Going
whether,
through the process too, like we saw some policies that were like, oh, we know why this one.
Exactly,
got established,
exactly.
because
Something
this
happened.
And
Exactly.
that resulted in this.
And that's real though.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really, that's a fear that is actually real. Because people come and go, right?
But I
So-
think we can think about, to Sarah's point,
Yeah.
sort of shifting to SOPs
Yes.
or rules or
Yes.
procedures.
Yes.
Or like,
Right.
this is how we
Yes.
operationalize
Yes.
and move away from, these are the board policies.
Right.
But this is how we operationalize and work as a district day to day.
But also understanding that it has teeth.
Right.
That just because it's not a board policy doesn't
Still
mean
is
you can just kick it to the curb.
accountable and
Exactly. So we gotta figure out how to make people understand that.
and there's a way of
Take it
doing,
seriously.
there's a way of doing a belt and suspenders to give you teeth. So for example, we, I think that this was Heidi's idea. We talked about a policy of delegation. Not delegation the way it was used, but like, we board hereby delegate to you the responsibility to develop standard operating procedures in the following areas in accordance with the DEP. These have the force, these will be monitored and checked on an annual basis and be subject to board oversight and have the force of law. Like, we can use the board delegation to you because 1016 gives the board the power to delegate. But in delegating that to you, there are certain areas of operations we are giving you responsibility over. We mean business, and we're not gonna just walk away from it and say, oh, I hope everything works out for you. That, like, you know, that when you say we use a multi-tiered system of support, when the superintendent issues a rule, and we could even write it like this, when the superintendent approves a standard operating procedure, that has the force of, you know, the law. I mean, and you can say, you know, that sounds grandiose, but it can be like that, like, in the same way that the General Assembly says, we give the council the power to regulate, and whatever they say goes. We can mimic that legal approach, and you can sort of say, you don't believe me, I'm taking it to the board. You know, I think we're not advocating and giving you like a kiss and good luck.
I think people just need to understand. Because I really do. I think people just really understand that when because I like it, I think it's great. It gives us the time to do the things that we want to, right? We're the experts, right? We know what we're doing.
Exactly.
However, I have seen, I'm telling you guys, I've seen how we have put effort, created all of this. I'm sure that you can probably think of some things. And literally someone came in and it was like, because it wasn't a board policy, it was immediately like overnight done and something new came. So I think the fear has always been
Yeah.
make it a board policy because you can't just undo it because it's a board policy. I think we just have to reorient ourselves.
But it does look like,
That makes sense?
Yes, absolutely.
it does look like, and I completely hear what you're saying. On the other hand, some of this stuff is being ignored.
It's true.
I mean, like, it's
True.
like, it doesn't matter if
That's
it's a
true.
board policy. I mean, and some of it is, the other thing is, it's just what AJ said. You can't keep up with this. Like, the school improvement team, every time that changes and the rules change around that, you're gonna go back and fix your policy. There's no monitoring of this. And you can do that. Like, you can make, okay, here we have an update to the school improvement team. We got this person, this person, this person. With legal counsel, you can fix it in a millisecond. We don't have to sit there and say, oh, the school improvement team statute is antiquated. This, when you read through some of these, it's like, you know, ridiculous. I
And
mean,
if we think about the railroad train, like the function of the board is to like uphold the values of the community. And I feel like that's in policy, we have to do the same thing where it's like our policies should be about their values. They should be about like integration of the board and process, right? That like inputs and then managing those inputs to be superintendent. And maybe there is like, yeah, like a way of like, even I feel like we've done such a great job with linking policy to regulation or to law legislation, sorry, and like other like cross references and stuff like that. And maybe that's just a way that you do with SOPs as well.
Yeah.
Where there's like a section that's like,
Like, this is the law, like, the
Yeah.
BEP told me to do this, like, don't even get in my face about it. Like,
yeah,
you have a lot of, I mean, when I was looking at the BEP, I get dizzy because there's so much direction to you about everything. You keep, like, you don't need a policy to support multi-team. You can say, this is what the state has put into place since 2010. This is the state law. I think you may have more tools available to you. And I'm not trying to diminish the board's power. I'm just trying to give you the space to do that work, and then we can, make sure, like, you're getting the support you need.
But I think, to me, the process actually increases the power for the superintendent and increases the power for the board, because you have less to focus on, and you can have more of a laser focus and really do the work here. The superintendent now is empowered to do what he needs to do without having to have forgive me, a rope around his neck.
Yeah.
So I think everybody's empowered. I think the real question is, are all these policies necessary? And the ones that aren't, implement them, and the ones that are, we build them up, et cetera, and we make it clear, changing culture and thinking now, as we're doing these SOPs, that they do have to, and that they will withstand, and that they are to be followed and adhered to, et cetera, et cetera. So I just think it's a reorientation.
and the thing I love about the separation of policy and SOPs is like policy in my mind, they're like, again, it's like about values that should stand the test of time, right? And SOPs, they should have teeth, and also they should be responsive, right?
Yes.
Who you have,
Yes.
you don't have to go through this long process, like, to be responsive to community. I do into like the school communities, like this SOP work. Now things have shifted, and we actually need to change it. And we don't want to go through a whole. We don't have time to go through it.
First,
I do wonder if there is though that you all probably like would decide is like, and also how do you make sure that people don't just come in and form like a erasure? Is he? And you would all the time find other people. We don't even. You do. You just didn't read one. And then second, like you didn't like it, so you threw it away. And like, but like I wonder if there are some protective things with like SOPs that's like, yeah, we want to be responsive, and like to change it, it needs to go through at least not just you. Do you know what I mean? And, like, before like changing the things, you know how it is when people are new, they come in and they just like, I'm gonna do it better without understanding why it was written the way it was written to begin with, kind of thing. So.
That could be scripted in a policy of delegating. We could even script that and say that a standard operating procedure has the force of, the board, and violations of it can be subject to discipline, and that they can only be modified with superintendent approval. I mean, there are ways to make the superintendent, make it really clear that these are rules coming from the superintendent, who is invested with a huge amount of authority to manage and administer the district. And if you violate the rules, you're violating the law of this school district. So it could be easier for you.
It gets in my mind when I think of this practice. I feel like there's still going to be policies. We're just renaming them as superintendent regulations, and we're not monitoring them as closely. I mean, we weren't anyways. Now there's a
Dirty little secret.
now there's the onus on someone who actually has to monitor them. It's not us. It's a suit. And I think this was brought up as an example earlier that it's called like the superintendent's rule book, and they have it on the website and everything. And they have like, these are the things that are delegated that are superintendent's regulations and rules. And like, we monitor them maybe annually, they give us a report on something, but we're not on the ground change, like you don't have to come through us.
So in my head, I'm like, these are still policies. They can still be written exactly how you written it. Just it lives with the district and not with the board.
Can I ask a question just on process moving forward? So this right here is something that tonight we're voting, right? And we're gonna bring this to the board meeting on December 17th to essentially approve the way things have been categorized.
Or maybe frame it as we're looking for the board to approve a reform process of the policy manual. Reform the policy, because what you're doing is you're revising and reforming the policy manual. So you want board permission, and I talked to Tyrell this morning, do you really feel like it needs to go? And he does, because it's a big change. And it's aligning with what the council has been instructing. So you want to bring the board into the conversation and say, are you okay, board, with a revision of the policy manual to own only certain policies and to delegate the operation and administrative rules to the superintendent? That's sort of the big question. And then, there may be some questions about, somebody's going to have to explain it, you will, but you'll explain that we're asking for permission to continue with this policy reform. It's really,
It's an update.
it's an update and permission to keep going and keep doing it this way, so that by the end of the school year, maybe, we're gonna have a whole new policy manual that's gonna be,
Well, it's also to delegate, because I think
yes.
we are only having 37 policies. When we had,
Except you count.
yeah. Really
Well, you just got a new one for Title VI,
Yeah,
so you may have as many as 50. Let's not all have a heart attack if you actually have 50. But it's gonna be organized in these tabs, and then there's gonna be
Then there's
permission.
like 60 that we're delegating. So I want them to know that
Yes.
we are delegating these and we're not owning them as we were before.
Yes, I agree.
And clarification, so I know what the next step then be, so say if they're like, sure, yeah, you wanna do this. The next step then would be for us to actually review what we are saying we wanna own and then further decide if we still want. So I'm looking at, again, the one that I think I probably was like, we need to talk about food services.
That's gonna be on you.
All the kids tell me the food, they always tell me about the food, so
Yeah,
I'm like, I
you're
can't.
gonna be writing that policy.
Yeah,
It's gonna be like the most important policy.
So what happens if we read it and we're like, no, we don't want that one?
You can change your mind.
Can you give that back to the
Yes.
superintendent? Because I'm
Yeah.
like, did we say that?
Yeah.
Did I say that?
My suggestion,
No,
and
your turn.
my suggestion is to, I think there's a lot of work you can start doing, like, we all agree that the goals and guardrails and governance, you guys get writing that. Because that's gonna be like your bylaws, and that's gonna be the first part of your policy manual. And you've got a lot of raw material there, you've got a lot of options language to pick from. I think my suggestion, and Tyrell may disagree, I think he wants to be able to communicate that you're owning your governance responsibilities. That's in A and B. And C. This A, B, and C describe how we're gonna take care of ourselves, how we're gonna relate to the superintendent. I would not worry about D and E for now, because you're gonna be pushing down some of that and owning some of that. I might be able to be helpful to you on the legally required ones, working with Nicole in kind of identifying for you what you probably are gonna wanna own legally. And then, as far as their job, that's off your plate. So I would start with A, B, and C, and think about, you can think about this after Christmas or whenever, about how you wanna do the work. But you're gonna need to start drafting some new policies. And the big ones are the first three. And then figure out who's gonna do it, talk to Tyrell, he always has ideas, and then get going on that. And meanwhile, I think I can field you some anti-discrimination stuff that kind of we wanna throw into it. And then think about how the superintendent, the cabinet should be thinking, like, how are we gonna take all this delegated work and do it in a way that is forceful?
I think one of our first ones we put out, this is just my thoughts, actually look at all of them and say, what do we need? Right, because I think a lot of it, we can use.
I mean, some of it you're gonna, like, the facilities stuff and the fiscal stuff, I mean, Zach is gonna look at that and go, no. So you're gonna find, I'm guessing, that you kept saying, well, let's let them declare it obsolete. Go for it, because you're gonna find that 90% of it is not even what you're doing.
Or bundle it with one, you know, you set up this thing facilities.
Right.
Sarah, in this document, thank you for putting it together, this is amazing.
It was a pleasure.
This is great.
So much fun.
Did you, the ones that we had deemed obsolete in our little
I
diet,
didn't
did you
include-
put, you didn't?
I
Okay, no,
didn't,
great.
because I
No,
felt like
that's fine.
if it didn't even pass us,
That, yeah.
why do we need to belabor it? I think, no, those got discarded.
No, that's fine. I just was
They're
making
out.
sure that.
And if I missed something, I think the only one I didn't find a place for was the turnaround plan. And I don't know what to call that, because that's sort of its own, I don't think that's a
city.
well, I didn't, so just full disclosure, I didn't put it on the list. I didn't know what to do with it.
It's not a policy.
No, it's its own animal.
Yeah.
It's really a strategic plan, which is your own, that's another place where you're gonna be doing work. And hopefully it won't be, it's gonna have a life of its own, and it's a standalone document now, so I think you're good. Any help you want in advance to prepare this for the board, since I'm absolutely not gonna be there on the 17th. I can write something for you. You can call me, however you want to present it. Tell me how I can be helpful to you in presenting it to the board. You just reach out to me and I'll script something for you.
You feel comfortable leading the discussion, and me and Andrew can kind of.
Can we understand what we're doing? I mean,
Yeah.
this is just,
Yeah.
yeah.
Thank you, I have a question / concern. As a parent that's tried to find policies in the past, it's very discouraging and sometimes impossible to find them, unless I know someone that knows someone that knows where they are. So moving forward, once you all decide on what policies you're keeping, are they gonna be accessible to, like, in one home?
They have to be. That is a big, that's huge. And I even included that in the language here, because I was picking up on what Heidi said. Well, it's actually in the rules.
All stakeholders. but-
Everybody has
I
to.
mean, I feel like I've heard that before, and here we are.
I know, but policies are the most, like, policies and rules should be so easy for you to find. Like, otherwise, what's the point of having them?
Right.
You can't, the kids should be able to access the code of conduct. Anyone who feels like maybe they're being subjected to sex harassment should be able to find the Title IX. I mean, you know that in the Title IX because it's been such a focus, but that should be everywhere.
Shouldn't have to go through 6 clicks to get to it. Right. Just go to the website.
Who's in charge of that?
You talked about,
Like that on-
like a policy with rules, like you could do them side to side. There are different ways that you can, but
You just go to the website, and you look on the side, some policies, right on that, policies too. And then you open up alphabetical order, or A, B, C, D, E, right now it's organized around buckets and it's very confusing, and then you have to go.
And they're not all in there.
You can't, and they're not all there.
And you
But,
can't just search policy.
but the one thing that I love, my intern that we were working with, looking at some policies today, and she loved the fact that when you do get in there and figure it out, all of the multiple languages, that is one of the things that I don't want us to lose. That is tremendous. Beyond just Spanish, I mean, there's all of those languages in there, so that also is a part of accessibility. I think it's just where they are, how to get to them is an issue.
In the
Is there
web
a-
design.
Is there a, yeah, I do wonder.
Or some of them
like,
aren't even on the web because they only have hard copies.
Yeah, I wonder, is there, not that we want more policies, but like, is there a policy that talks about how policies need to be accessed by families? Is that a thing, that exists under accessibility?
We could make that a policy.
Because that feels like,
know about the electronic school board system. Yeah, that's where they are basically.
yeah, I think that's something we could consider, is like,
That's in your relations with the community, that's in
Yeah.
that bucket on your.
us creating a policy about how policies shall be accessible.
And I've seen other districts that we actually do.
Communication between board members and the
Well,
community
if
members.
we can do it, but then if
I
we
mean, who's in charge of that?
but that's the point, if we have a policy about what the value of that is, and then regulation or SOP delegated to the superintendent, that would talk to the communications team, like,
I'm sorry, I think that the way that is in the electronic school board, I don't think it was actually intent. I don't think it was bad intention.
I don't think it's my
Yeah,
intention, it's
I
just,
think what happened was they were trying, I'm just trying to think about this, they were trying to figure out how to, accessibility in language, and they use that. But what they threw was that you shouldn't be an insider able to get to that. That everyone, no matter, you could be a Timbuktu, you should be able to get on that website and find it.
yeah, it's a design issue.
Yes, I'm thinking that if you click on the word policy, it opens up, you have all the alphabets, right? And you have policy, you find them by the title, right? When you click on Title IX, when it opens up, you can go ahead and translate right there. You don't have to have those links to the translation. Once I open up the policy, there should be a way for you to just go up there and click. Because right now you can do that, right? You can go ahead and click and get any link you want, like 60-something languages, right? That's what we need. You get to the website, you can see right there on that ribbon, policies. You click on that, look for it alphabetically. When you click on it, it opens up and you can have it in multiple languages.
Yeah,
I can also show you talk to Frank. Frank is the guy who maintains our electronic school board system.
Okay.
To see if there's a
He
way
can do
that he can create, right, that he can create something
Yeah.
so that it will be more accessible to
Yes.
people in the public.
Yes, and still be able to translate it.
Yeah.
And the same with your standard operating procedures or your superintendent rules, however you want to describe it. You want that to be, like organized students,
Yes,
staff,
yes.
facilities, like those categories make some sense. But if you are a parent and you want to see, what's the student code of conduct, for vaping in the classroom, but you should be able to just go right there and not have to worry about paper anymore. I'm assuming most people can access electronically, not everyone.
I know what we did on our webpage, we have the ones that are pertinent to our department needs. When you click on them, it takes you to, it's supposed to take you to the electronic school board. So we did that on purpose. I couldn't do all 110 of them, at least the ones for our department, because I wanted people to really understand how to get to that type of money. Really, I wanted to have that.
and I think that's a great example of, again, a person who believes in access. Do you know what I mean? In a department, and you all go on that link to do that. I think the power of having a policy around something like that is that it holds us all accountable to make sure that's possible across the district. And that, like, again, I think as a parent, from the parent perspective, like, yeah, I want to be able to call that out if it's not. Do you know what I mean? Like, I want to be able to say, y'all actually do have a policy, I'm making policies accessible, and I can't find them, they're not accessible. I don't know what our role is as, like,
but not just policies, but the rules too.
the
because
SOPs, right?
One of them that's moved, and huge on this policy, is the observation policy. That's a parent-facing policy. How do I find that? If it's not.
Well, now you have the number.
Well, that's true, but how do I get to it?
Right.
But, so things like that that are parent facing, but aren't a policy anymore, I need to know how to find those, where to find those, and I can't find them when they're a policy.
I think that's a huge component of the delegation. I think you're right. I think we can draft a policy about delegation that makes it clear that whatever rules are pushed down are like hyper visible to all stakeholders, community, parents, and staff. Like a teacher should know, not to bring up a bad example, but like, what are the rules around money? What
Engaging with students.
what are the, and there should be no ambivalence or not ambiguity about where everything is. And I think part of the problem is that it is sometimes hard to get your hands on what is the governing document. But if you redo it in this global way, you can standardize it, and then it's your rule, it's your rule book.
So I think that piece that, like, it's really important to note too, like, sometimes when we zero in on one aspect of accessibility, like you're saying, like, it seems like there's so much attention to detail around languages, which is amazing, but that's not taking into account multiple intelligences and visual accessibility, auditory accessibility. Do you know what I mean? Like, some people may just need to, and this may be very aspirational, probably cost money, you know, whatever. But like, what's it like to like click on a policy and have it read to you? So you never hear this. Do you know what I mean? Like, these things exist.
You can read a whole book on tape, why not?
Yeah, so there's like, we don't have to limit what's been done to what can happen.
Although that would be a very dreary request. Can you imagine, like, instead of
Add beats on
oh
it.
my God, oh, like you'd have to be insomniatic. I'm gonna listen to the rules on.
I would really do that.
Oh,
You
yeah,
just
that
gotta
is
get
really
like
weird.
famous people with great voices too.
I didn't know.
I listened to the whole book of, that movie Hamnet. The one that is about the story of Hamlet. I listened to the whole thing over Thanksgiving, 13 hours. I couldn't pull myself from doing it. I was like this with my cell phone. Well, she had this beautiful accent and she's talking about this woman in the woods, and so it's,
So you don't listen to policies.
I just don't want I don't want them read to me, but.
I think when we implement that and we create that policy on how to communicate policy, is there like, part of our plan to just be like not a working group, but just some sort of advice that we give to the website. Because I just feel like this is also just something we can work with Aubrey and be like, can we just give advice of like, this is what we're working on, do we just give it to the person who fixed the website? Maybe it's just as simple as putting a document, a Microsoft or a clickable PDF that I can click from here that shows me a PDF.
Can you do that as a policy committee?
I mean, because I don't know how to go on the website, but I'm saying like we create just a suggestion sheet as a policy committee of like what we want this to look like, what we want the policy tab to look like.
I don't see that. Yeah, I think it's a mixture of communications and French.
Yeah.
So you said you're doing counselors, which is huge. He may be able to attend the meeting and say, yeah, this is what.
Like, what can we do? Yeah, what can we do? What can't we do? Because it could just be something.
Before
simple.
you get to that, you need to draft.
Yeah. So then, like, after we draft and we're ready to
It's
like
sort
put
of
it
like
out.
you're talking, I mean, you're talking about in some ways the most important part, which is how you get it out there, but you may want to rebrand the whole school district.
Yeah.
Because
like, you click
that
on
check
this.
mark has been used since my kids were
I know
No-
something.
no offense to the check mark.
She did only say templates, she could choose this specific for this website. Does that work like there's a certain amount of templates that she can choose?
First of all,
Yeah.
I was like, no,
I'm sitting here thinking of the visual.
It's not-
Yeah, there should be a graphic, there should be.
we need a new.
Alright, so we have to make a motion to vote to bring this to the December 17th meeting.
So what we said before was a motion looking for the board to approve reform policy manual.
Yes.
Right, that's, okay.
Second.
So that's really.
All in favor?
It's not happening.
Motion
I just wanted to make sure I get the whole thing right.
No,
you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think that'd be cool.
For real, that's
This is exhibit sheet.
Yeah, and get rid of the check.
Heidi stopped thinking about how.
So old, so yesterday.
No, after that.